Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. It is Juneteenth. It is a federal holiday. Jim, it's also National Martini Day. And so we feel it is appropriate to remind people they can get 3 martinis from us every single day, and it won't affect your blood alcohol level at all. So I think that's a pretty good deal.
It is, when you phrase it that way, Greg, it does make it sound like we're offering non-alcoholic martinis. And people will start showing up at the Radio America offices or something like that. How do we get them? Where do we get them? I'll take them. So they're metaphorical martinis, but Greg did accurately describe the price. And you know what? It's been a long week, so if you want to have 3 martinis on a Thursday, you go right ahead.
Today, we're going to be talking about the Democrats getting even crazier on immigration. Actually, just being honest. It's been their position for a long time now, but we love it when they're honest because they're once again on the wrong side of a lopsided issue with the American people. We'll also be talking about the ingenious way the Israelis started their military strikes on Iran, and then also the Trump team wanting new nuclear talks, given all the latest developments militarily here. So we'll get to all that in just a moment. But first, let's be real. Most skincare products aren't made for men, and when they are, they're usually not great. They're overly complicated, they're packed with questionable ingredients, or they just don't work that well. But Caldera Labs high-performance skincare is made just for men, simple, effective, and science-backed.
Every product is tested and trusted. Every formula takes years to develop. Nothing launches until it works. It won't clog your pores, and all products are non-comedogenic. It's cruelty-free, meaning there's no animal testing ever, and it is plastic neutral. For every product sold, 1 unit of plastic is removed from the environment.
In a consumer study, 100% of the respondents saw smoother, healthier skin, and more than 90% noticed better hydration and a more youthful look. Skincare doesn't have to be complicated, but it should be good. So upgrade your routine with Caldera Lab and see the difference for yourself. Go to calderalab.com/3ml and use 3ml at checkout for 20% off your first order. All right, Jim, it is Thursday. It was last Thursday, a little after dinner time, that we got word that Israel had started their preemptive strikes against Iran's nuclear program, and we've learned more details about that since then. One of the things we certainly learned on that first night is there's a long list of really high-ranking military officials who were taken out on night 1, and we didn't have a lot of details on that. Were they separate strikes? Was it one strike? Well, now we know. Daily Wire with the story. Israeli Secret Service operatives used a fake phone call to trigger what appeared to be an emergency meeting among Iran's top military leaders and then targeted the location of the meeting. According to a report published Tuesday by the Jewish Chronicle, Mossad used Iranian communications channels as part of a coordinated disinformation campaign targeting top Iranian Air Force officials and luring them all to the same location for what they believed to be an important meeting. Amit Segal told the Call Me Back podcast on Monday, quote, "What Israel did was create a fake phone call for 20 members of the Air Force senior staff and calling them to a specific bunker in Tehran. This meant there was no one to give the order to fire the initial salvo of 1,000 ballistic missiles, as Iran had previously threatened to do. The added bonus for the Israelis was that Iranian military leadership was essentially crippled from the moment of Israel's first strike against the world's top sponsor of terrorism. As the Chronicle reported, Mossad had used, quote, falsified communications through Iranian channels, unquote, to call the meeting, which successfully lured the entire senior leadership of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Aerospace Force, including Commander General Amir Ali Hajizadeh, his deputies, and key technical personnel into a fortified bunker outside Tehran. Shortly before the first Israeli missiles struck other targets across Iran, that bunker was hit in a precision airstrike, eliminating Iran's top missile command. So, Jim, I imagine the first thing said before the missile hit was, "Oh, so who called this meeting?" And then just boom, because apparently everybody just assumed somebody else was ordering this.
So first of all, Greg, the standard saying is, I'd love to be a fly on the wall. You don't want to be a fly on the wall because you're going to get incinerated with the rest of them very soon. But let's just say you would love to have a video and audio feed of the confusion on everyone's faces as they look around. Ali, I didn't call this meeting. I thought you called this meeting. We feel like we've seen this sort of thing in movies, and we all kind of roll our eyes and say, oh, come on. They surely would have some sort of password or some way to ensure that it's an authentic order to report to this place at this time. Either the Iranians don't have that, or the Israelis knew it and knew how to put them into their. Greg, I think there's something we can all take away from this story. And for me, it is I hate in-person meetings and I'm never going to them again. I think whenever somebody, we really need you at this meeting. I think this can be a Zoom meeting. I think we can do this online. We should not all be there, all in the same room, because it's unlikely that America's enemies or our personal enemies are planning an airstrike on that particular meeting. But there's always a chance that is the case. So I don't think we should be attending it. Finally, Greg, isn't it a little bit, you can even say really it's depressing or it's really satisfying that the last thought going through their heads was, this meeting could have been an email.
Well, Jim, one of the things in politics is that every piece of news, you use it to justify your prior position. For you and not wanting to attend meetings, this is a very valid one.
I think I'll just be pointing this, sure, it looks like National Review is saying you have to come to this meeting, or the Washington Post. This could be a Mossad op for all I know. This could be somebody else. I would say it could be the Iranians, but the Iranian intelligence building is smoldering rubble right now. So we're pretty sure it's not them.
Where does this stack up with the beepers and some of the other things we've seen in recent tricks and trades?
Pretty high. And, to get a little bit more serious here for a second, there's been this massive discussion about should the U.S. drop the ultimate, the MOP, the massive ordnance penetrator. Get your chuckling out of the way, you 13-year-old boys in the audience. Should they drop that on the Fordow site? And a lot of us have said, would Israel go into this conflict not knowing that knowing that they have to be entirely dependent upon the United States to take this particular site out? Maybe they must have some other trick up their sleeve, maybe a commando raid, maybe drones, maybe sabotage. If they can get the entire Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps into one room, unknowingly, to be at a place where they know they're going to hit it with an airstrike, they probably have some other plan for the Fordow site, but I guess we have to wait and see, Greg.
Exit question, and I guess we could use this in the second martini as well. But since we're on the topic of bunker busters, there are some on the left, there are some on the right saying before Trump can do this, there needs to be authorization from Congress. What do you say?
I think, look, this is a good question for our occasional guest host, Andy McCarthy. I know there are some folks who argue the War Powers Act is completely unconstitutional. I guess you could kind of squint and argue, well, back in 2001, 2002, there was the authorization for the use of military force against terrorist targets. We were thinking Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and places like that. But, if Iran is the world's biggest sponsor of terrorism, then this is just striking at terrorist targets. I think it'd be preferable. If I were president, I would not go that route. I would want to bring in at least the leaders in Congress and say, this is what we know. This is why we think this is a pressing threat to the United States. This is why I'm going to do it. And almost dare members of Congress to say, no, you can't do this. Now, but I think it's always better to have congressional authorization. The question is there some sort of ticking time bomb scenario, some ticking clock where the military action has to be taken on by this date or the circumstances change? Any way you would slice it, it's always better, as apparently the old saying regarding, Lyndon Johnson, better to have him inside the tent expelling out than outside the tent expelling in. I would want the leaders of Congress to sign in. And we saw on, John Kerry and Hillary Clinton and lots of other folks who voted for the Iraq war, turning around 6 months later and saying this was a terrible idea, the president never should have done it. And people saying, well, why did you vote for it then? But nonetheless, I think it's always better to get buy-in in Congress than it becomes their operation too. And they are invested in the success of the operation as much as anybody else. And so I think I prefer if Congress weighed in. At minimum, I think the president is obligated to notify Congress, we're doing this and here's why we're doing this. I'll
tell you why they all voted for it in 2002, because they thought they needed it to be a viable presidential candidate down the road. And ironically, for Hillary Clinton, she listens to her husband finally, and it cost her the 2008 Democratic nomination because Obama, who was a state senator, made his opposition to the war, which was completely irrelevant on a national scale at the time, the centerpiece of why he should be the nominee, and it actually worked. So that vote cost Hillary more than she could have possibly thought at the time.
That's why you want them on the record, to give them headaches 8 years down the road.
Yes,
being farsighted.
Be careful what you ask for, lawmakers. Well, there are some important questions you need to ask when you're searching for a doctor, whether it's for just finding a new primary physician or whether you've got some new issue you're concerned about and you're just not sure who to go to. Check out ZocDoc for the efficiency as well as the reviews so you know you're going to the person that's going to work best for you. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality, in-network doctors and you can click to instantly book an appointment.
We're talking about booking in-network appointments with more than 100,000 doctors across every specialty, from mental health to dental health, from primary care to urgent care, anything you could need. And you can filter for doctors who take your insurance, see if they're located nearby, see if they're a good fit for any particular medical need you may have, and you can check out if they're highly rated by verified patients.
Stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/3ML to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/3ML. ZocDoc.com/3ML. All right, Jim, on to our second martini now, and it still relates to Iran and Israel and the U.S. and where we stand with what we want to see happen with Iran. This is from Axios, which reports the White House is discussing with Iran the possibility of a meeting this week between U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff and the Iranian foreign minister, according to 4 sources briefed on the issue. The objective would be to discuss a diplomatic initiative involving a nuclear deal and an end to the war between Israel and Iran. The meeting hasn't been finalized yet, but is part of a last-ditch effort by President Trump to swerve away from war and back toward deal-making. A, quote, meeting with the Iranians this week is under consideration, a U.S. official confirmed, and the meeting could be a make-or-break moment for the question of whether the U.S. will join the war in order to eliminate Iran's nuclear program militarily. And so I think the only condition here would be, let us destroy every last molecule of this, and then the war will end, and not a moment before that. We know that there's U.S. ships positioning, Jim, so unless this is a really elaborate bluff, this is going to be the last-ditch effort. But the question is whether we're even at the point where a quote-unquote deal is a possibility here.
Yeah, well, yesterday I saw people characterizing it as a leak. And when they're deliberately putting it out, I'm not so sure that it's a leak, but basically to the Wall Street Journal and a bunch of other news organizations, quote, President Trump told senior aides late Tuesday that he approved of attack plans for Iran, but was holding off to see if Tehran would abandon its nuclear program, people familiar with the deliberations said. So I think this is very clearly a message to Iran. We are ready. We can strike you anytime we want. Trump has already talked about on Truth Social that the Iranian air defenses are either destroyed or neutralized. But he's not, but he's holding off on giving the go signal, to giving the order, I suspect, because he very much wants Iran to come to the table and say, yes, we will give up our nuclear weapons program in exchange for you not getting involved in the war. We'll see if that happens. By the way, I hate to correct you, Greg, but you kind of mispronounced it. You say it's Steve Witkoff. I believe the name is pronounced Steve Hamas Duped Me Witkoff, which he said this earlier in an interview regarding his negotiations between Israel and Hamas. He thought they had a deal on the table, then they reneged, and he went on and said, Greg, isn't it terrible that Hamas is untrustworthy? And the really terrible thing is that there's just no way for Steve Witkoff to know. There was no way for him to possibly have foreseen that Hamas might lie. I mean, sure, barbarian, butcher, slaughter people, but he didn't think they were liars. Come on. The other particularly ignoble moment in Steve Witkoff, international man of mystery, his diplomacy around the world, was the time he went to the Kremlin and negotiated with Vladimir Putin and was reliant upon the Kremlin's translator. Now, I'm fairly certain, Greg, the United States government has people who speak Russian. And I'm fairly certain the U.S. Embassy in Moscow probably has a whole lot of people who speak Russian. I think the whole State Department and intelligence community, defense, there are lots of people who speak Russian who could have gone with them. You aren't dependent upon the other side to make sure that they're translating your words accurately and they're translating of Putin's words accurately back to them. I'm hoping if Witkoff gets into negotiations with the Iranians, he brings his own translator this time. Listeners know my less than impressed perspective on Steve Witkoff. That said, if the Iranians were willing to actually make this concession and we could avoid U.S. involvement in this war, wonderful, great. I would rather not have the U.S. get involved. I will say, though, because I was thinking about Stephen Covey always says, begin with the end in mind, begin with the objective you have. Yeah, as the president has said many times, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Therefore, this conflict must end with the Iranian nuclear weapons research program destroyed or dismantled or completely eliminated. Right? That's non-negotiable. So now the question is, how do we do that? We can do it by sending a bunker buster down onto the Fordow site. We could do it if the Israelis send commandos, if they have some other option. Or if the Iranians say, okay, We're going to give it up. We're going to have it dismantled. We want to have a nuclear energy program. We're going to do this publicly. We're going to do this with IAEA inspectors. You know, that could be a scenario. And if that's a scenario the Iranians are willing to live with, terrific. Let's go ahead with that. As Ronald Reagan famously said, trust but verify. Actually, here's a heads up for Witkoff. The Iranians lie too. So you're going to have to double check everything that they say. I don't know what's going to come out of this. I do know, I was thinking back, and I have a corner post I just put up on this before we started taping. Trump sounded really incendiary in his first few years in office against Kim Jong-un. Little rocket man, fire and fury. We will utterly destroy North Korea if they threaten us, stuff like that. And then he had 3, face-to-face meetings, and he stepped, I think Trump would very much prefer to be a peacemaker and to have this. By the way, let's keep in mind, North Korea still has its nuclear weapons, right? So you can debate how effective those negotiations were. But I think Trump would love to say there's a deal on the table. We've avoided a war. We don't have to go through with this. I think his instincts are much more dovish than his pugnacious rhetoric suggests. Undoubtedly, if you wonder if Trump is willing to take military action against Iranians, just ask Qasem Soleimani, who is currently buried at the Qasem Soleimani Memorial Interchange by the Baghdad International Airport. So, he's willing to do this, but I think there's a difference between one airstrike and what's going on here. The moment we bomb Fordow, we are in a state of war against the Iranians, whether it's declared or not. So, somebody asked me, Jim, what would you do? And I was like, well, I'd really like to know what the president knows. I'd really like to see the full intelligence picture and to know, would the bunker buster take out Fordow? Do the Israelis have another option? And are there things we could do to assist the Israelis in that other option? So we will see. But I think the fact that Witkoff is in here indicates that Trump would not mind having an exit before the all-out conflict that it certainly seems like his rhetoric is pointing to.
A lot of complicated stuff going on there, and we'll find out whether these negotiations take place. Do they take place in person? Do they take place on the phone? Well, if they are going to take place on the phone, maybe it's open phone that can get the job done. If you're running a business, you know that every time you miss a call, you're leaving money on the table. And when every customer conversation matters, you need a phone system that keeps up and helps you stay connected. And that's why you need Open Phone.
Open Phone is the #1 business phone system that streamlines and scales your customer communications. It works through an app on your phone or computer, so you no longer have to carry around 2 phones or use a landline. With Open Phone, your team can share one number and collaborate on customer calls and texts like a shared inbox. That way, any teammate can pick up right where the last person left off, keeping response times faster than ever. For example, Greg, if Steve Witkoff said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea, he could switch it over to Marco Rubio, who could say, what are you talking about? That's a terrible idea. And they could get to the right answer faster. Think about what a benefit this would be to the administration in its negotiations with Iran.
Yeah, exactly. And no missed messages either. That would really come in handy if you miss that message and you take an action that you wouldn't have.
I got BB on line 2. He says it's a really bad idea. So we'll see.
Open Phone is offering 3 Martini Lunch listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/3ML. That's openphone.com/3ML. And if you have existing numbers with another service, Open Phone will port them over at no extra charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers.
Rule number 1 of investing is compounding is the royal road to riches.
The Watchdog on Wall Street podcast with Chris Markowski. Every day, Chris helps unpack the connection between politics and the economy and how it affects your wallet.
If you're saving money and you let compounding work its magic, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you will be wealthy.
Whether it's happening in D.C. or down on Wall Street, it's affecting you financially. Be informed. Check out the Watchdog on Wall Street podcast with Chris Markowski on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now. But as I said in our notes today, it's so dumb, it's so bad, it's so crazy, it's almost good. And that's because a Democrat is actually telling you what they really believe. Not their election year rhetoric, which makes you think that they're, right down the middle of the road, maybe a little bit to the left. No. On immigration, they tried to hide it for a long time, but Biden administration policies pretty much revealed that they want as many people coming to this country as they possibly can. Don't really know how much these people have in their background. They didn't vet them very carefully, and they just dumped most of them into the country. Well, that's not happening anymore. In fact, we just got note from Customs and Border Protection that 0 illegals were released into the country in May. There were a number of interactions at the border, but 0 released into the country. So what do the Democrats want to do? Well, at least for Maxwell Frost of Florida, pretty far left guy, he has decided that he doesn't want any illegals in the country anymore either. Just in a very different way.
And to my Republican colleagues who say, I don't want any undocumented people in this country, I actually agree with you. So let's document every single one of them with a speedy path to citizenship.
Yes, amnesty. Didn't say amnesty, but that's exactly what he wants. There's not even like get to the back of the line or, pay your back tax. The old Obama rhetoric. No, this guy's just like, let's just legalize them all, get them on a fast path to citizenship and reward their illegal activity. And of course, attract millions and millions of more people doing the same thing. So Democrats have learned nothing, Jim, which is good for Republicans in the election cycle, but not good for rational politics in Washington.
Greg, judging by those comments, he wants instantaneous citizenship for everyone who's in the country illegally. Now, just for perspective, listeners, I think you still have to wait like 30 minutes for a Domino's pizza. So, it probably should take longer to get citizenship than a pizza, even from Domino's. Greg, after last year's presidential election, shocking defeat for Democrats. Lots of them didn't expect it, just utterly devastated, never thought they'd lose to Trump twice. Everybody started wondering who was going to emerge as the leader of the party and possibly end up as the nominee in 2028. I don't think Chris Murphy is a good choice. In fact, I think he's a really terrible choice. But I did notice that, one, he's trying to position himself as a quote-unquote leader in the Senate. And also his message is we have the right policies. We just haven't said them loudly enough. There's no moderation in his perspective. He doesn't say we were wrong on immigration, we were wrong on spending and inflation, we were wrong on national security. There's nothing he points to. It says Democrats need to move back to the center. He's saying policy-wise, we were right. We just aren't communicating. And I think that there is going to be an audience for this. And I don't know if Congressman Frost intends to run for president. I was looking it up. He represents the congressional district around Orlando. Not an unbelievably heavily Democratic district, but I think it's like D plus 11. So it's pretty darn safe. So he can say something like this and probably not suffer too many consequences. Good luck running statewide, though. But just kind of this sense that there will be a chunk of Democratic primary voters who want to hear that they're okay. To quote a former Democratic senator from Minnesota, they're good enough, they're smart enough, and doggone it, people like them. Even though objectively, based on the election results, they are not good enough, they are not smart enough, and doggone it, people do not like them. And but the message of we're just fine, we just need to quote unquote explain it better. That's how we're going to win in the future. People love hearing that they don't need to change. People love hearing that, no, you were right all along. It's just that the idiot voters didn't recognize that. People always love hearing that. So I think this message from Frost is not that, we don't need to rethink our policies on immigration. We don't need to have a tougher line on the border. We just need to legalize all the people who are illegally right now. There'll be an audience for this because it's very soothing to the average Democrat. I don't think they win a general election by this. I don't think they come within a country mile of winning a general election with this. So in that case, keep going, Congressman Frost. Good luck to you.
Yeah, once the 2028 platform comes around, you're not going to see that language or from whoever the nominee is. But that is what the mainstream of the Democratic Party wants. And I think most Democrats in Congress want. And Chris Murphy, he likes to position himself as a leader. He is a leader in abandoning his family and carrying on with a left-wing lobbyist now. But he's usually the first one out with the worst possible hot take. It's usually after a shooting of some sort. But any sort of controversy, you can count on him to come out with something that the bulk of the American people would probably not agree with. So, Greg,
he's finding his truth. I could get really off color with that. Just listeners, insert the punchline that you're of your degree of appropriateness, whatever you prefer. I could go very Sam Kinison on that, finding his truth and where he found it.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of regard for Senator Murphy around here. But Jim, quite a Thursday. We still have Friday. We'll have, I'm sure, plenty of other major headlines and crazy things to talk about. Until then, enjoy National Martini Day. Maybe even have a real one. And I'll talk to you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you don't already, and tell your friends about us as well. Thanks for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific Thursday and join us again on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.